unmute button and ask to speak. Otherwise,
hello and welcome to the Policy Times evening show, the India Policy Show. This is the only, I think, India show which which picks a very crucial and pertinent policy issue, and our experts discuss left, right, center about that issue, and we try to find out the best possible solutions. In short, economics is normally defined as the science of making choice. And in today's context, we have so many choices, it's very difficult to make the best out of it. And I think, and that's the one of the toughest job of economists of different countries, to find the best possible solution to every crisis. And when we talk about crisis, the world is suffering from, I think, the unprecedented crisis that is ever possible. Coronavirus has not only created a health crisis today to the world, it has posed one of the greatest economic crisis that the world can ever see. Now, when we talk about that, today we thought when we talk about crisis sessions on is coronavirus leading to recession? Then we did a session when the IMF report came, and IMF report indicated that the world economy would contract by 3%, and then how different countries, the advanced world, the emerging world, will be hit by the ongoing and upcoming crisis. Today we decided to go one step ahead, and this crisis is the first crisis in the world where all countries in the world are sufferers. So before that, whatever economic recession or crisis came to the world, either America was in recession, or Europe was in recession, or 2-3 countries are in recession. The other countries were the direct or indirect sufferer from that crisis. But this is the first crisis in the world when the entire world is in crisis, whether they are advanced countries or weak countries, poor countries, or emerging countries. So that is the topic today. Does this mean that the world will have to find new solutions? The economic model of the world will also change from here. And I'm very privileged to announce our noted economists from across India and Bangladesh. Let me introduce Dr. Didar Singh, who is the former Secretary General 2012 to 2017 at one of India's largest and oldest industry associations, FICCI, Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Singh, he is also a very noted and successful bureaucrat, one of the earlier day in Indian Administrative Services officers, and retired as a secretary in the Department of Overseas Affairs in the Ministry of External Affairs. We have with our Dr. Ahsan H. Mansur, who is an ex-IMF and also he is the executive director at Policy Research Institute, Bangladesh, one of the noted economists from Bangladesh joining us today. And we have Dr. A.K. Enamul Haque, who is the professor economics in the Department of Economics from East West University, Bangladesh. I'm also very happy to introduce Dr. Didar Singh, Dr. Shariq Nisar. Dr. Shariq Nisar, I think there is a window behind you. If you can change your location so that we can see you more and you become more visible. Dr. Shariq Nisar is a professor at Rizvi Institute of Management Studies and Research, and our regular experts, Dr. Professor Ujjwal Chowdhury, Pro VC, Adamas University, and Prashant, who is a senior journalist. So a long list of eminent speakers joining us today. I'll not waste any more time here. 2-3 news just for our viewers. The number of infected corona cases have reached 2.5 million, which is a humongous number, and the death toll has reached 171,000. So this is no more a small crisis for the world. India the cases are rising very rapidly, though the social distancing lockdown has been imposed very actively since the beginning, but the way numbers are increasing, there are high questions, and there are very important questions now on the achievement or effectiveness of the lockdown. Now we need to introspect what else should we do Is it lockdown that is enough to control and contain the number of cases in India? 15,000 active cases, 3,290 have recovered. The total death toll have also increased to 601. With this, one striking point that came to my mind, a couple of news. China has acted very strongly against India, uh, responded in fact saying that Chinese investment is a key driver for India's industrial growth and economic growth. This was against an Indian government's rule, saying that we will curtail any foreign direct investment through our neighboring route coming from China. Second important thing, the IT companies' prices in the stock markets are falling. Almost all the prominent IT companies, their share values have dropped by almost 6% in NSE after President Donald Trump has announced that in the lights of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect the jobs of our great American citizens, I will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the United States. This is a historic, I think, announcement by any, especially from the American president coming, saying that we will hold the immigration or suspend the immigration for now. India will be one of the countries worstly hit because our IT industry's revenue as well as employment largely depends on American business with America. Lot of clashes happening between Chinese and different governments. So Chinese embassy in Paris have been very aggressive. The way China, there are a lot of criticism against China, and the way China is addressing that looks a very defensive and aggressive at the same time. So Chinese embassy has written that the residents of retirement homes were made to sign certificates of waiver of emergency care, or the nursing staff of FHAT abandoned their post overnight. So basically, this by this letter, what Chinese embassy had tried to say that the uh, French government has allowed their elder citizens to die out of hospitals. The hospitals will not provide. And similar, there was a similar letter the Chinese embassy has written against a German editor, Bild, a newspaper, saying when the German paper attacked Chinese leadership about their indiscriminatory, information and transparency, they attacked again. So then similarly, a lot of tit for tat is happening between this, giving an indication that the Chinese leadership might have to learn a bit more in handling the diplomacy, the kind of diplomacy China will learn. And that I think we will discuss. I'll ask Enamul Haque, Dr. Enamul Haque on this, that can China really be a superpower? Because this would decide how China handles issues. With that, I want to come to our experts. I want to ask first Professor Ujjwal K. Chowdhury to give an account. Do you think, given the enormous impact of this crisis, the corona crisis may lead a new way of thinking, a new economic model for the world? Professor Chowdhury.
At least a new way of looking at the calendar for sure, to begin with.
So
before Corona and after Corona, BCSC. So that's for sure to begin with. The first reaction that has to come facing this crisis is resolution or resolve. Resolve to protect the life and livelihood. To that extent, several countries have actually faltered in the initial stage on this resolution. That's why those countries have got affected far more. Some countries have gone for lockdowns and protecting lives faster, as in Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and several others, and they have got good benefit. Even in India, Kerala is a good example for that. So from resolution, the next one that comes is resilience. How our businesses are ready to be resilient at this point of not just businesses, employment or lives, how they are good for resilience. So on medical front, on testing front, several countries are taking lives faster, and we are one nation which is one of the lowest testing at this point of time. Though the testing range has gone up in recent times in the last 3 days, and it's crossed 300 per million, which was far lower. So resilience is the next point. How can we protect our businesses? How can at least we survive this crisis? The next after resilience will be return. Now there won't be exactly return to what exactly was in 2019 December. That situation may not ever come because social distancing may need to be in some form or the other continued for a long, long time. And social distancing will require completely reimagining, and that's my next point, reimagining the future ahead. For example, I am a professional of university, we have 5 days class. We may need to have certain batches for 3 days, certain other batches for 3 days. We may need to have businesses also like that. We may need to completely alter the way the functioning, the way we operate today. The digital part of our operations, which was also ran, will become the preeminent part. There was a joke sometime in social media, many have might have seen, that in the past we used to go to the internet for a or go to the social media for a break. Now we have to come to the real world for a break. The virtual will be a dominant part of every operations, whether we like it or not. And this reimagination would bring forth certain aspects. We are spending 21% of our GDP, 21% of our budget for defense. We need to move to a different thing. 5% of GDP or 5% of budget may be required for public health. At this point of time, India has 1.8% of the budget for public health. Education is around 3%. It may have to go beyond 5%. So reimagining the priorities of budgetary priorities, reimagining the priorities of the society as such. And therefore, the focus on healthcare and pharma has to be in a far stronger manner. And this would also lead to reform finally. And on the reform front, basic guaranteed minimum income for all, and rights to health, education, and work in a real sense. We value right to speech in a big way, which is right. But please understand, freedom of speech is a luxury of the, I'm sad to say, but today is a luxury of the middle class and the upper class. For the downtrodden, freedom of speech is not the priority. Freedom of work is priority. Freedom of food security is priority. The right to health is priority. So we may have to reimagine those aspects. In the economy, we may need to look at self-sufficiency in core sectors. Today, there are several countries which brings even pins from exported, which export even pins. So we may have to relook at our priorities of production and have the essentials produced locally so that we are not dependent on others. Sustainability would be a major factor. Sustainability and CSR and all these issues were, sometimes fancy slogans, sometimes also ran slogans, would be the priority areas going ahead is another point. And lastly, I would like to put forth, yes, neither a pure capitalism nor a pure socialism which turns into state capitalism in effect can be the way out. Mixed economy in some form will remain and should remain. However, the mixed economy of the Indian variety, which finally helps a certain class and is completely the migrant problem today, and the way we are treating our middle class students transport from Kota to the homes and not treating the migrants in the same on the same plank is a proof of the pudding that the economy in the garb of mixed economy has been completely exploitative of the people at the lower rungs. And we are all party to that because we are middle class, privileged class. We are all party to that in some way or the other. So reimagining the future with closer cooperation with other nations on health and similar issues, health, education, and technology issues, but being self-sufficient in the core sector internally, and higher priority in health and education. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you so much. I would request all speakers to be actually confine your points within 3 points and speak as 3 minutes, in fact, and speak in bullet points as possible. Dr. A. Didar Singh, I want to come to you. You have worked with ILO on the migration issue, with the future of work issues. If you can unmute your system and then share your views, that you have also seen many recessions. You have also seen the world because and NRIs, the way they function. You have also been the leader of one of India's largest industry association, knowing what industry feels and what industry needs. What is your observation given the situation?
Okay, Mr. Haque, I'll very quickly go to some of these issues. I want to first dwell on at the macro issue. I think that's important for us to all understand. What is the world looking at? Because you're talking in terms of changing models, in changing economic model, which is, in my view, is actually changing business models. So let me first look at the global view. Global GDP is around $80 trillion
What
so far
industry
as the
feels.
whole economy is concerned, of which trade is probably about 25%. Now, all of this is under severe stress. You're absolutely right. The world has never seen anything like this. And it is possible that the curve may go very, very badly. In fact, there is a possibility that the curve may really become, like they say, L-shaped curve, where there will be structural damage and you can't come back. But the hope of the world is that it will be a V curve. A V curve means you go down, but then you climb up the moment the pandemic is over. Now, is this going to happen? We don't know. The good news is that in all the earlier pandemics, this has actually happened. Whether it was Spanish flu or SARS or whatever else, economy went down and then it came straight up. So maybe there is a hope that if this can be solved, it will happen. Though some experts are talking of a double V curve, which is a W curve, which means it comes down, goes up, and then again comes down and again goes up, and there's a second recession that may happen in the world. But coming to the changing business models, I have a slightly different view here to share. I believe that we are already in a very structured environment in which both the structures of governance and the value addition that happens to them is already set. So irrespective of what this coronavirus may do, ultimately these will remain the same. There will be changes, but the structures will remain the same. In other words, you'll still have a company board, you'll still have stock markets, you'll still have sovereign governments. All of this at the macro level will remain the same. But the changes that will come about with the coronavirus, and more important actually with technology, with the changes that we see in the future of work, they will impact in a very, very big manner. There's no question of it. And so, in many ways, we have to relook at what we talk in terms of globalization. All the benefits of the last 70 years may be gone. Countries may now become much more insular, much more value chains may now be more confined to local areas so that you're not dependent on global situations. The whole China factor is becoming very, very, very important. In this context, I have only my final point here to make, just like Professor Chowdhury was just mentioning. I believe in something called the 6 C's. This is what we need for the future. And the 6 C's are: be calm, C for calm, be confident. That is the second part. Third is communicate all the time with everybody. Number 4, collaborate. Number 5, be compassionate in whatever you do. And finally, in terms of business, make sure that you have cash. So if you have these 6 C's, is how you will survive in the future post-corona world. Thank you.
Last point is cash, and I think that is the thing that the entire world is facing the difficulty, and I think that is scarce now. And the countries are printing money to meet that expectation. Dr. Ahsan Mansur, working with IMF for long now, working also with Bangladesh government, having extensive idea about the IMF research reports, as well as what Bangladesh government is doing to revamp its own economy. Coming from South Asian belt, Dr. Mansur, your observation on this, do you think that we need a new model, new economic model from here? So if you can unmute, Dr. Mansur.
Yeah, sorry. I really don't see that we are going to see a major overhaul of the existing economic system as it is now.
Okay.
What we are seeing, as rightly pointed out by my previous predecessor, is new business operational models, and that's where we will be seeing some changes. Like what? Like we like to be less dependent on China for everything on earth that we produce in this world. Everything, the hospitals, the medicines, the face masks, you name it, everything is coming from China. And that probably there is a realization that the world needs to diversify its sources of production. It doesn't have to be autarkic. It doesn't have to be, don't have to produce everything, every place, but at least not everything produced in one place. And that is probably a major lesson from this supply side shock that we saw at the early part of this pandemic. Now, the second thing is that, as rightly pointed out, that dependence on technology, particularly the remote exchange technology, is going to be, it has increased and it's going to be increasing further in future. The physical presence and all that things may diminish over time, which will have impact on various sectors, like say airlines, like say office spaces. Nature of downtowns may change over time. So those are the long-term implications of that if this virtual world takes shape. Even the superstores that you see in downtown, like Macy's or Fifth Avenue, they may not will have impact in future if everything becomes virtual. You can see everything without going anywhere. So, and you start liking it. Right now, you still like to see things by yourself and take it in your hand and test it out and all that. So, once that kind of change happens, the changes will be coming. Third thing is that we as a country, I think everybody realizes now that we have ignored healthcare, public healthcare, for quite a long time. And we're paying the price for that. Definitely, developing countries have done it because they're resource constrained. Rich countries also have, in part, like America, for example, they have always this debate about private or public provision of public goods like healthcare, and that has undermined their efficiency level. And that debate is still going on. Bernie Sanders is taking a position. My view is that the mainstream US will slowly move towards some more public sector driven health provision and so on. And developing countries have to spend more. Like Bangladesh, for example, spends only 0.7% of GDP in the budget for healthcare, for the Ministry of Health. It cannot be like that. It has to be at least 3-4 times that amount. And we're paying the price for it. The whole ministry, health ministry, the health operators, they're completely not ready and not up to the point to take over this challenge. And the country is going to heavily pay for the price for that. So public health is one area that has to be re-looked at and refocused in future. The social dimension is very important thing. I think the victim of corona is by and large are the poor. And that is remarkably noticeable either in the US, the most people killed are black and Hispanics, or Bangladeshis, or poor South Asians, or some other people like that. Most people who are suffering in India are those who are the migrant laborers, with the bottomless people. Most people who are suffering in Bangladesh are the garment workers and the workers who are working in like rickshaw pulling and all those things. So the victim is the poorest people, unfortunately. Even corona discriminates among the people. That is unfortunate. And that's why we need better public health and better social security system to take care of it. That's how the world should change in future. We don't need a wholesale reform of our existing system, in my view. Thank you.
Dr. Mansur, thank you so much. I want to come to Dr. Shariq Nisar, coming from a very different background of economics. On your view, do you think some very ethical and fundamental principles of economics, maybe due to the violation of those, can lead to a situation like this? Or in general, what is your reaction to this? Yeah, if you can unmute Dr. Nisar, then I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Akram, for this opportunity. My feeling is a bit different. Globally, we are still in mid of war, and I think it is too early to start discussing what kind of model the world will see. Only after we have passed this crisis period, we will get to know what the damage was and what was the extent of damage and uh, you know what was the reason for these damages, and then we'll really come to a strategy whether it is this or that. So from my point of view, it is too early. We are like in a mid of war and talking about how the post-war situation is going to be. Nevertheless, having said this, there are a couple of fundamental observations that are quite visible now. And I think one of the most important observation that I am making is a period of deglobalization. We all know that post 1990s in India and in many other countries during the same period almost. We had a wave of globalization where talent from poor countries, their services were demanded by developed countries, etc., etc., and in the process, lot of developing countries gained experience and strength, economic strength. That my feeling is that this scenario may not continue. There will be is higher scrutiny of movement of capital, movement of technology, movement of labor post COVID-19. That is one observation. Another is, we also have to see that many countries have, reacted to this uh, COVID situation like very developed countries. For example, India has almost similar strategy like US and other countries. I'm afraid, and I wish I'm wrong, but my feeling is that in a country like India, more people are going to die because of lack of opportunities, because of lack of employment, because of lack of livelihood than Corona. Even in the worst cases, death rate in Corona is 3%, 4%. So even if 100% people are affected, it will it will affect 3% in terms of death, whatever the average we have at the moment. But if this lockdown continues, I'm very, very scared that this is going to kill more number of families. This is going to bring millions of people below poverty line, which we took almost 3 to 4 decades to bring them above poverty line. So those kind of situations are also, I'm afraid that will reflect once we are settled with this corona crisis. We will evaluate whether the reaction that we had following very developed countries was suitable to our economic situation or not. Could we have done something different or not? Only time will tell. At the moment, I just said that it is a warlike situation, and any strategy post-war or during peacetime may be a little early for us to discuss at the moment.
Right. So we are at war. I think the post-war situation will be more scary. So I think the preparation now will decide a lot of factors. Dr. Enamul Haque, two very complicated and also different question I want to pose, and then it is also open to all. Prashant Tandon can comment on this. Number one, for the first time in human history, the petroleum crude oil price is below zero. This has never happened in the human history. And though people say that a negative price suggests that the sellers were paying buyers to take deliveries in a bid to avoid the incurring of storage costs. They can't maintain the storage. That's why they have to sell it. How do you read this in the present context? Second is, most important part is that public expenditures, the consumption pattern, the supply, the logistics and supply of the world, yeah, the economic productivity and production process. Do you think all this will remain same, and how will they be impacted post-corona?
Thank you, sir. It's a nice set of questions. I think on the first question, if you look into the global oil price, it is very natural at the moment, given the production that has happened, given the fact that they are still producing, and there is virtually no demand except for emergency services across the world. There are demand for some shipping services, some airlines are still using it, but it's a significant drop of all demand. So I think it's natural when you're producing high, the prices are low. At the moment, they creates a problem for the people who are producing, and that's why they want to give away their oil because they don't have a storage space, and that's how I see things. At the same time, it's going to put many of the investors across the world who are investing in the oil industry into trouble. And many of the economies who are dependent on oil revenues will be in trouble. So you see that part is going to come. We could have taken advantage, some countries like us, if we had our import bigger. But I don't think any of us had bigger import storage capacity. So this is more of a problem of the countries who are producing it. The advantage that people could have taken, I don't think there's a lot of opportunity, except for maybe few countries. On the other side, the second question that you mentioned, that how this supply chain is going to change over time. I think after the corona scenario, the issue that I would like to bring in is that the post-corona scenario is still a big question. At the moment, we are fighting a war, and everybody is taking a defensive posture. Defensive posture means everybody is trying to protect them, and that includes every country. Countries are moving into the idea that they can produce some essentials and not produce others, or something that, it's more of a conservative trade regime. To me, that is not going to work. That is going to create more problem for every country, because all of us who are exporting, like Bangladesh, for example, exporting products, we have a huge export capacity. And if everyone moves into a conservative mode and said, no, I'm not going to produce this, I'm going to produce in my home, it is going to create a negative problem for also them, because it's you change your whole comparative advantage that you had. So I don't think that will be a good strategy for countries to look into it. So if you look into the supply chain scenario, I think this the way you think about it, and I particularly look at some of the comment that you think we will get out of China, or we get out of America, saying getting out of India, for example, on immigration that you mentioned in the beginning. These are nice political words. To me, it's not easy to implement. Chinese have been trying to push their own production system out of China for many products because of their shortage of labor. And they have failed, because it's not easy to shift a production center from one country to the other, despite all the problems, because other person has to be ready, other countries has to be ready on it. So that is not going to happen. However, certain things is going to change. Probably the first of all, the people like who are intellectual work, which you can do from home, these works will probably stay home. In other words, people will say, look, let us work from home rather than traveling. So the traveling airlines industry will have certain trouble, because that probably will never get back to the same level. In addition, countries are going to put more restrictions on traveling now, because the whole corona spread has come out of traveling route. So people will say we need more restrictions on traveling, and that would limit the traveling side of it. So people will go virtually, that is online. However, if you look into the global changes, we should be also thinking, and I think my own point is that we have to think, how do I re-innovate the whole system? We, for example, within our countries, in particularly, we are looking at in our countries, and we're saying that we are using an education system that is probably moving in following whatever has been going on. So in other words, we are following a Western education system. We should have created our own education system and prepare everyone for that. We are still, for example, I'm just giving my examples, we are still an exam-based system. Innovativeness has to come in terms of education. And any country who is innovative, they have to solve their own problem, and that will happen. So taking this in cue, education system has to come into a major change, major shift, and say, look, how do I produce graduates who can innovate, who can meet the intellectual challenges of the future? Instead of, even if we say, I want to do this, it's not going to work. On the health sector, you will find out telemedicine will come, and this will be a competition. You may find out that somebody from America is going to prescribe me in Bangladesh. Remember, all these are going to happen. And these are going to be another challenge, which means if your education is not properly done, you'll find it difficult to compete. So I'm pushing in terms of the future changes, that you have to change your education system. You have to change your training strategy so that you can say, look, here is my advantage. And I think India, Bangladesh, South Asia has some advantage, given the fact that English is well understood in this region compared to many other regions in the world. And on that, if we take advantage of and change some of our education system, it is possible that we can come up with this. Now, when you say that people cannot travel to United States for immigration, most of the jobs will be online in future, and that is going to happen. Some of the intellectual jobs. Physical jobs will stay as it is. I don't think that will change. So you have to create space by limiting those who can do online and leave the others to do physical jobs in places where they are needed.
Excellent. I have a cross question here. Prashantji, if you can quickly make your comment on the petrol price issue. And then, right. Yeah, Prashantji, if you can unmute and give a comment on the petrol issue, I have a very important question to make to Dr. Didar Singh. Yeah, Prashantji, go on, please.
Before that, I'll make a point on what the consensus of the House is about the fundamental changes which is required in present scenario. But briefly on oil thing, a few days ago, Trump had sensed this is coming. And last 7-8 years in oil politics and oil market, a new player had come. And the new player was breaking gas or shale gas from US. And these are small producers, and they started dominating the market also because of them. US become independent from OPEC countries for their own oil or energy needs. That fracking gas is unsustainable because it's a high production cost activity. It is unsustainable below $35 a barrel. That is what the difference that is what the tussle was going on for the last few days between Russia and the OPEC, who blinks first and who brings down the production. Russia did some, but later on the production, as other panelists said, the production became the same, and the demand was absolutely nil.
Okay.
Except for the emergency services.
Right. Okay.
So that was inevitable, and Trump has sensed this. And now, what would be the new market? What would be the new realities? How this will affect the geopolitics? Because the energy is important, influencer in the global economy. How the politics and the economy plays out.
Right.
The other important thing, the sense I'm getting, from all the panelists, there's a consensus that this time has come for fundamental changes in economy, and the way the word governs is economic governance. The economic governance in the word, saw as fundamental changes after the Bretton Woods conference in 1944. I think the lifespan of that Bretton Woods principles and that kind of global economic governance was for 70 years. That requires fundamental changes, how the new regime will operate in the world, how the tariff system would be, what would be the trade relations between the countries, what will happen to global value chains, all these new emerges which has come.
Prashantji, I want to come to Dr. Didar Singh and Dr. Mansur on a very important issue. I think it's going to be a little out of box, but my point is free movement of educated, literate, intellectual people has led to innovations in the United States, in Europe, and different parts of the world. You talk about Indian scientists, Indian engineers are bringing innovation in US now. Given the virus, this coronavirus's nature, that it can come back again, which will largely hamper free movement of talented and educated people. Now, these people staying in India will not be able to be productive enough to bring innovation in their societies. That is one, because India cannot provide, or Southeast Asian countries cannot provide the conducive platform or infrastructure for innovation. That's one. Secondly, neither, due to this corona epidemic in future, they will not get free access. As we see today, that Trump has suspended immigration. So we will see less movement of these people to go to America and Europe for innovation and a new product development. Don't you think that this will give some advantage to China-like countries which can provide infrastructure for innovation to their own core talented people? What kind of challenges are we, like India and other South Asian countries, going to face? What do we have any solution for innovation? So, Dr. Mansur and Dr. Singh, any of you can address it.
Yeah, okay. You have raised a very important issue, Akram, of the mobility of people in this situation, whether it's innovation or whether it's movement for work. But let me just very, very briefly mention that you had also talked about how For the first time in the history of the world, the price of oil has gone below zero. But just remember, this price of oil you're talking about is the WTI price, which is a Western Texas intermediate price, which is in May, not now, which is a futures price, which is gone. The Brent price still remains at $20. And that is really the place from where we have it. And I agree with what Haque Saab was saying a little earlier, that demand has fallen 30%, but production has fallen only 10%. So there is going to be a mismatch and you will have this price. But the important for immigration, the issue of oil is that our brothers, we have 7 million people from India in the Gulf. They will suffer. They will have to be returning back to India because they're not going to be able to find enough economic activity and enough economic opportunity in the Gulf. That is a major issue. That's much more than the few thousand that go to America or to Europe for IT work that you're talking about. It is a big one for immigration is actually going to be these immigrants which are in the Gulf, who suddenly will find that their economy is contracting and we'll have to find work for them way back in India. But coming back to your original question of innovation and what's going to happen, you need to look at this entire issue sectorally. You can't look at it for a general economy. If you look at, and I would name only 5 key sectors: energy, healthcare, auto and transportation, infrastructure, and technology. Very briefly, I'll tell you, so far as coronavirus and the changes in technologies that are expected to come about, energy is already declining and you will have a problem with this, but it will be replaced by solar energy. So far as healthcare, there will be a tremendous increase in healthcare. So large number of jobs, large number of people, large number of activities and production is going to enter the healthcare area. So far as auto and transportation is concerned, yes, with electric mobility coming about, there's going to be a major change in transportation and auto sector, and we will have to change the way we manufacture. We'll have to change the way our cities work with the whole transportation sector. So far as infrastructure is concerned, I think it will continue to be a very high priority, whether you're in USA, you're in India, or you're in Bangladesh, or anywhere. We will have to continue to work on infrastructure, and you will see post the corona situation, infrastructure will not go down. In fact, housing will be a major requirement even for those who want to be online from their own homes. So infrastructure will remain. Finally, technology. If you notice one very specific thing, despite this problem you're talking about USA where technology stocks are falling, etc., just remember in this entire last 3 months, which are the companies which have done well in their stocks? It's only the technology companies. And these technology companies will continue to do well because the future of the world, not just with corona, the future of world with technology is an area where technology companies will actually do better than anybody else. So technology will provide new jobs, technology will provide new way of working, technology will provide artificial intelligence, machine learning. All of these are new things which are going to be there and impact different sectors in different ways and ensure that possibly people who are skilled in these areas will end up doing better than those that are not.
Dr. Shariq and Dr. Nisar, if you are Mansur, so if you like to say anything on this.
Thank you, Akram. On Brent, I just wanted to add that this negative as clarified by my previous speaker, is only for the forward price for May, which expired yesterday, because these people roll over their forward contract, and it was expiring yesterday, and the real buyer, were not in position to pick up that storage capacity because it's already brimming, and therefore that went negative. It is just like you are trying to dispose of excess item from your house. You don't find anyone, and therefore you ask that garbage man that take some money and take it from my house because I have nothing else. So that negative is not going to continue for long. It is just a matter of situation that today people are unable to utilize that excess capacity, and that was the reason. June forward is almost same as it was before. So, and hopefully that once this crisis is over, prices of energy will stabilize. Now, so that was one. Uh, you know, uh, on technology front also, if you look at Indian economy was thriving on service industry, mainly providing services to Western world. And that, I think, because of the economy that is going to get impacted there, will hit back Indian economy in terms of earning foreign revenues. So not only the Middle East, where we have been getting remittances, and which was one of the strongest source of foreign exchange to our country, it is also the Western, our IT companies which were getting revenues from outside, that will also get hit. And therefore our IT industry also has to design new ways of sustaining themselves, not only necessarily from outside world, but also they have to explore the potential within the country. I think that is also a point that we need to keep in mind. There will be all critical industries. So there are industries that will not pick up for some time, like logistics, like aviation, like travel and tourism, etc., because people will have suspicions. There will be suspicion within communities also, there will be suspicion on vendors also. So all those things will be reshuffling to adjust to local considerations, local sensitivities. And I think our business will do well if they keep those things also in mind.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Mansur, unmute it and then.
Yes, I just want to touch 3 points which came out during the discussions. First point is that are the countries going to encourage the brain drain that continued for so long, the highly skilled workers and so on? My belief is that Trump is a temporary phenomenon. No matter what, America will attract under H-1 visa the topmost brilliant people from anywhere in the world. And America is not alone in that. Germany, UK is also striving to attract Indians and others in their country. We are not getting it because everybody wants to go to the America. That's the reality. China is also going to be in that competition. So the market for that segment of the poor people will always be there, has always been there, and it's not a factor. Trump is a transitional thing. Second point that I want to make is that technology war is going to intensify in the coming years. And it will be driven by two of the major economic powers, China and USA. And that's where the war will be fought in terms of the domination of the future of this world economy. So both parties would like to have control on the technology, and that's where the battle will be fought. And we have to be, the winner will really be the ultimate winner of this global economy. Finally, I would try to make one point, is that if you look at it, this petroleum pricing thing, I'm not bothered about one night it's falling by 37 points, whatever, dollars as negative. The bottom line is that US shale industry is decimated. It's going to be wiped out in the near future, and the market will then stabilize because they were the one which is the non-state player. They were the ones which were creating a supply which could not be controlled. The rest of the world, the supplies are dominated, controlled by the governments, be it Saudi Arabia, Aramco, be it Russia, be it Mexico, be it Venezuela, whichever. It is controlled by the respective government. The only non-government player in this case is the US shale producers, and they will be wiped out. They will not be able to survive in this round because this petroleum prices is not going to go up to $35 or $40 anytime soon. And they will not have the capacity to sustain for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years for the prices to bounce back to $50 or so. So come back for them. And that will not be economically viable for them. Thank you.
Chowdhury, quickly, and then I have a very important bomb, actually, atom bomb here.
Okay, before the atom bomb bursts here, I would like to add to the ongoing discussion. Very good, multiple areas being thought of. As Dr. Nisar has said, that we are in a battle and we are not sure of where the situation will go. Obviously, the situation is already very bad, as you have already said, the number of infected people and the number of killed people, and the total and IMF has already said that around 3% contraction of the world economy, which is an $80 trillion economy, can happen. So under the given situation, the possibilities of different nations becoming inward looking will increase. That has to be understood in this context, because the travel bans and travel restrictions which you have mentioned, the H1 visa stopping, immigration stopping which you have mentioned, all these and many others will lead to inward looking nature of the nations, and the population at the lower rung who have been affected much more severely in this whole crisis will have a bigger say, or will have a stronger position to. I understand on the one side there will be surveillance of the state in the name of public health, but the affected people will also be there on the streets at a certain point of time. So basic guaranteed minimum income and public spending in a huge way, because the private sector will not be in a position to spend hugely. Public in the interim period, the public spending to keep the economy floating, public spending in fundamentals of the or the core sectors would be a necessity. And as we said sometime earlier, and Dr. Mansur had also corroborated, higher healthcare and higher education investment from the public sector, from the government, which I said at least 5% or more in health and 5% and more in education, would be a necessity. Not just that, even for protecting the population from the onslaught of economic onslaught of this crisis, more than 5% of the GDP will be required. European countries have put up more than 8 to 12, 8 to 18%, different European countries and the Western countries. But the countries like South Asia have not even gone to 1% yet. So more than 5% public spending is required even to face the crisis. But going beyond, health and education would be one sector. So therefore, I would strongly believe, I would like to believe that the role of the public sector, role of the government in the interim period at least is going to increase, because the economic instability and unstructuring, the economic instability in the private sector coming out would be so strong that the public sector spending has to increase. Otherwise, growth cannot be sustained.
Right. So my point is definitely inward-looking people like countries like India, Bangladesh. We can't give jobs to such a millions of numbers of people. In fact, we were the largest remittances earners before. Now, leave about the remittance. How will we incorporate those people? That's a different segment. But now, atom bomb question. In October 2019, and I think no media is talking about this. The International Monetary Fund has said that the $19 trillion atom bomb private debt that is there, private companies' debt that is there, if any recession comes, in October 2019, I'm talking about, if next any great recession comes, $19 trillion atom bomb of private companies' debt will be more scary than anything else. The global debt has hit $250 trillion. America's debt is 101% of its GDP. $25 trillion American government debt is there. Talking about the other countries, UK has like per capita debt, external debt for American people is more than $62,000. Per capita external debt for UK is $1,127,000, which is 313% of its GDP. Can you imagine that this number? Even Japan's debt, public debt, is more than 250%. China's public debt is more than 200%. Now, these big figures, all countries have printed money. They have borrowed money to sustain their growth, to push their growth. Do you think that this situation remains same? Where will countries get money? Do you think this will have tremendous and severe effect? Because companies, private companies create jobs. Who will create job now? Where will this $19 trillion money will come? 40% of these big corporate debts are from United States, Japan, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Spain. No one knows about India, China, and other countries. Do you think this is going to have a severe impact? Maybe Enamul, Dr. Haque, you can begin, and then I can go to Dr. Mansur, and then Dr. Singh.
Dr. Mansur would have been the right person to start with.
Okay. Dr. Mansur, would you like to answer this? And then how will countries prepare from here? You are in mute, Dr. Mansur, and then I'll go to Dr. Didar Singh then. You are in mute, so if you can unmute. Do you want me to help you? I have unmuted you.
Akram, in the meanwhile?
Yeah, please. So if you can.
Yeah. So this is no doubt very important consideration, but the kind of situation that we find ourselves in, Akram, as I said, that we are in middle of a war, and you don't discuss the consequences at that point in time. You remember, I'll give example. A year and a half or two ago, we were discussing about Greece economy, that the country is on verge of defaulting and this and that. But countries eventually learn to survive. So whatever is the level of debt, that is, you are right that globally we are almost we have on ourselves we have about 3 times the debt of as we produce. So our produce is X, and then our debt is about 3X. So similarly, for a country like India, all kinds of we have today about helicopter money and increasing consumption. We know that our economic situation was already very precarious after demonetization and after GST implementation, etc. And the government was falling short of meeting all its target. Not only central government, but state government, central government, and consumer loans all were going in a very fast upwards side. So everybody's debt in the country was going up, and then suddenly we got caught in this corona issue, and which is going to further reduce government income, and also going to make government budget bleed, and that will take long time for us to catch up. But ultimately we have to understand that whatever is the cost, what is the most important thing is how to survive ourselves in this very precarious situation. Once we are out of that, then only we will start looking at number. Today we are in such a situation that even if our debt goes to 400% or 500%, we at the moment are not going to be looking at those numbers, because at the moment we are in midst of very different humongous crisis, and we have to address that issue first. But obviously, going in the long run, we will have to discuss that how to reduce the debt level, and that is where actually my own area of work comes in. That unless we have a sharing model where capitalist is assured of not only capital production but also earning interest out of it, irrespective of the outcome of the economy, is not going to sustain in the long run. We will have to move towards risk-based capital financing, where the capital is also taking risk and entrepreneur is taking risk, and that is only possible way of sustaining our economies in the long run.
Thank you. Dr. Mansur, you are still mute. If you can unmute and then speak, because I tried.
Okay. Let me answer it this way. I think there are two balance sheets that we normally talk about. One is the public sector balance sheet and one is the private sector balance sheet. Both balance sheets are now, as you rightly said, is overburdened with debt. US economy, after this crisis is over, it will exceed, the debt level will exceed the level of public debt that they inherited during the Second World War, 109% of GDP. They will reach that level, the public sector debt. The private sector debt is also another issue. The public sector debt, they are funding it through only one reason that they still have fiscal space is because, first of all, they don't care about the overall deficit. They print money and you hold the dollar. So they have this free printing press, and the rest of the world is takers of that printed money, which is a piece of paper, which is called dollar. So that is one reason that US can get away with that murder. But not everybody can get away with that. Countries like us, we have to be following the prudential considerations and all that. We have to follow our relationship with debt to GDP, our relationship with revenue to debt service, and revenue to debt ratio, how many years of debt you have collected, which you can, in terms of revenue collection, you can pay off, and that will determine your fiscal space. So this is the crisis. Once we get out of it, we have to seriously, particularly countries like us, have to seriously think about strengthening our public sector balance sheet. It cannot go on like what it is.
How do we do that?
Well, you have to, look, you have to slowly but surely increase your revenue base, and there is scope for that. Bangladesh is only 9% tax to GDP ratio. India is about 18%, 19% tax to GDP ratio at the consolidated central and at the general government level. So you can go from 20 to 25% easily to 30%. Why not? America is doing 30%. Europe is doing as 40% of GDP as taxes. So you have to increase it. The best performing economy today is Germany. That should be the role model. They have not succumbed to these things. They are now have the best capacity to spend, and they are spending. They're spending a lot, but they're not vulnerable. Everybody in Europe is going to Germany and saying, demutualize our debt. That is means basically Germany will take over the debt of France, Italy, Spain, and all that because they ganged up. So Germany will obviously reject that thing as part of the EU solution. But they accepted reluctantly €500 billion as well. So that is under political pressure and because to salvage the European system, European Union as a whole. So they accepted it. But that cannot be a solution that one country, which is the fiscally prudent, will take over the load of the rest of the Europe.
Era of colonization. I would like to term it as a new era of colonization. Maybe, yeah, if you can touch upon this.
Finally, I would say, hello?
Yes, please go on.
Okay. Finally, I would say that, look, debt problem of the private sector is another big issue. China has the highest concentration of a private sector debt as well, and that is going to drag their growth engine down the line. So we have to be careful about not accumulating too much debt on the balance sheet of the private sector as well, because private sector cannot function with that kind of heavy overhang of debt servicing burden onto itself in the corporate balance sheet. So we have to be careful. We have to be prudent. Post-corona recovery period, we should start thinking about our fiscal restoration of balance. We cannot think of a situation like America where interest rate is coming down while your debt is going up, contrary to all the economic theories of crowding out and all that kind of thing. It didn't happen. This is the lowest interest rate and highest debt burden. It never happened. And it is not a sustainable solution to get out and grow at a respectable rate down the line. You have to have some kind of normalcy return to the financial management in the public sector of the major economies. Same thing with Japan. So these economies are stuck. They will not be able to grow very fast ever unless they solve their public debt problem very significantly and also address their private debt to equity ratios significantly. This has to be looked at very carefully. It's really a ticking time bomb. You have rightly said that atom bomb, but I call it a ticking time bomb. Thank you.
Time bomb. Actually, IMF has said it's a time bomb. I said it's an atom bomb. So I want to come to Dr. Didar Singh on this and maybe overall your comment on this. We would like to conclude with your closing remarks, actually.
Okay, Akram, very, very quickly, you are absolutely right that this is the worst economic condition that the whole world is finding itself in. But let's remember one very basic factor, different from all the earlier pandemics and all the earlier economic problems or recession that the world had in different places. This is the one time that all governments are actually putting out relief packages for the first time in every country. This is a remarkable situation. Yes, the debt issue is really a ticking time bomb. I agree with that. It is a major issue, but this is not the time to raise it. At this time, we have to somehow manage to make sure that our economies get back on the rails. We have to make sure that people get jobs. We have to make sure that people survive in their health aspects. We have to make sure for migrants. We have to make sure so many issues. And this is not the time to raise the issue of, yes, the NPA issue and debt issue and all that is there. Yes, if we can manage to handle inflation, and inflation is being handled at the moment, we will be able to carry on at least for the next couple of years in a manner in which we somehow keep the economy ticking and make sure that not just India, but all around the world, we see this happening. And you've seen it happen. You've seen the relief packages that Trump has announced, that the finance minister in UK announced, Germany's announced, France has announced. Everybody's announcing various relief packages because that is the only way to do. And in India also, I know we have a $3 trillion economy. Maybe at the end of it, if you look at it, maybe we'll have to announce relief of up to 1 trillion. It's a very large figure. It's a very, very large figure, but we will be compelled to do it if we want to get the economy back on the road.
Public spending.
Right. Dr. Haque, your point on this, and maybe a concluding remarks.
I think I agree with most of the panel. The debt problem currently is I would not worry about it. But at the end of the day, once this is over, this will be an issue. And this is not an issue built because of Corona. It was previously held problem. So, and I think I would look into this from a two perspective, whether the countries of developing world who are still growing has a growth rate, particularly in the countries in our regions in Southeast Asia, which has a higher growth rate, versus the countries who do not have a high growth rate. So getting out of the debt problem, if it is happening in our countries, you still have some hope. Obviously, there are advantages for countries like us because our revenue collection has been very low. So countries can create certain strategies. But the countries like particularly North American countries, or even in European, they have the biggest problem because their tax burden is as high as 70% tax burden on income tax. So if you have 70% income tax, where can you raise more? And they have a debt burden. So what is probably going to happen, and I'm not sure this is maybe the solution. One solution is to give a debt relief, and people who are investing on bonds. So remember, it will be a transfer from one group to the other, and eventually some of the countries will be affected. Those who are buying on certain bonds, and honestly speaking, the global organization will not want this to be happening. So they will be pushing their the strategies so that they stay in together and do not divide. But I would say that for countries like us, at the moment, we have to deal with the current crisis. In future, with the economic growth, with the poverty reduction, with the population, aggregate demand growing up, it is not going to be as big of a problem as it is for many other developed countries where the growth is a in big trouble.
Excellent. Now, I want to change the question for our next three speakers, maybe if they can give the views. And Dr. Didar Singh can also finally give the concluding remarks. From the INC 42 News portal, one of India's largest e-commerce websites are laying off people like anything. And believe me, and we all know that MSMEs or India's small sectors are the largest job creators. Not only job creators, they are also the largest revenue givers, generators. Now, Grofers is firing 2.5% of its employee. Clever Trap is firing 20% of its employee. Travel Triangle is firing 50% of its employee. Shop 101 is firing 40% of its employee. Fab Hotels is firing 80% of its employee, 30% of its employee. Tribo Hotel is firing 30% of its employee. Misho, Capillary, Appco, a lot of Shuttle, Instamozo, they all are firing people. And they are the latest job creators of our white collar jobs. MSMEs need massive support, I think, because they are cash crunch, they need money, and we all the South Asian countries need to save them. Dr. Didar Singh, you have been leading FICCI for long. What kind of solutions would you think that I will come, our panelists, you would be the last speaker on this. What kind of actually solutions do we need to bring for this? Dr. Chowdhury and then Dr. Nisar can talk about this. Professor Chowdhury?
I'll come back later.
Okay, Dr. Nisar, if you can talk about, we need to save MSMEs. What are the solutions do you think that we should bring to safeguard our MSMEs?
This is, in my is the most critical question that we should be asking and deliberating. Whatever number you have mentioned, Akram, if you look at our own number, Indian economy, 90% economy is informal, and according to CMIE, almost 12 crore people have been out of work for almost a month now. So 12 crore people who have been on, at the lower middle rung of the, economic status, most likely many of them, a good number of them, will go below poverty line. So whatever time we took in bringing them up, it has gone in month or two. We'll be losing our 2 decades of work. If this continues, as I said previous also, that this is going to be the biggest challenge. How are we going to address? Now, one option that government currently, whatever I'm looking at government, is that they are trying to see that how the distribution aspect, how money can be put in the hands of those who are consumer, so that they not only survive, but they also push back the economy, which is now halted, so that it impacts. Now, this is a bigger challenge, because earlier also we know by our own experience that it has been very difficult to put money where the mouth is, or there has been leakages. But looking at the technological advances, looking at the India stack kind of infrastructure that we have developed now, looking at the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile Jam Trinity, I think if government has a will, it can reach out to the people who are most vulnerable at the moment. What we need is that how to support them to a level for a period that they can sustain themselves, they can tide over their problem. I think the biggest problem or biggest challenge that we'll be facing is government's ability and will to support them. As far as I'm seeing that there is a will is there, ability is something that also we have to see over a period of time. At the moment, yes, this is most important question for me, and I'm still thinking that what are the ways that we can really look at supporting those people.
Excellent. Professor Chowdhury.
Yeah. Uh, Bharatiya Kisan Union, which is a major farmers' body, yesterday have stated that 1.5 lakhs crores relief package is required only for the farmers, which is very close to 1% of the economy, slightly lower than the total amount that government has said, 1.7 lakhs crores for the package. So 1.2, they've said no import of dependency on agricultural products and import dependency on agricultural products. So they are wanting self-sufficiency on agricultural products in the given situation. So this is one way. What Dr. Nisar has said, Council for Monitoring Indian Economy has noted 119 million, which is exactly what roughly Nisar Sabs has said, 12 crores. People have gone are without an income in April, month of April. So, and this might continue for some time. So unless public spending is there in the form of relief package to this section, which has started very meager, only 18,000 crores have been given to the 9 crores farmers under the PM Kisan Yojana. So unless public spending is done there, unless protection is given to the micro, small, medium enterprises, MSME enterprises, unless import dependency on products and services which are connected to this sector is stopped, and empowering this sector to produce more locally. In fact, Bangladesh is one of the reasons of success. 8% growth rate that Bangladesh has is actually developing the MSME sector in a major way in every village, going to every village. So unless these focus, and finally, unless a basic guaranteed minimum income for survival of the poorest at the grassroots is guaranteed in this society, which will require a complete rejig of the budgetary provisions, along with the earlier point of 5% for health and education. Unless these are done, MSME sector cannot be protected.
Excellent.
And MSME sector will be the public spending, and MSME sector will be the next driver of growth in this country, because there will be a huge restructuring of the economy, and this sector has to be revived for protection of for public dignity and employment, minimum dignity and employment.
Right, Dr. Chowdhury. And now, Dr. Singh, I want to come to you with this. India, especially in the current context, Dr. Singh, if you can hear us, India, we always have underestimated the informal sector because of our revenue collection, tax collection. We always wanted to collect tax, always try to do any forceful, unforceful means to bring them under the formal sector. We neglecting the amount of jobs it creates, neglecting the amount of things it creates. Now, though you have not handled the informal sector, but right now, protecting the informal sector is as important as protecting the big corporates and formal MSMEs. You being one of the leaders leading the industry from the front, what are the kind of solutions you would like to recommend to the government, that what should we do here to safeguard the entire gamut of India's corporate, formal, informal?
Okay, Akram, I mean, you are going far beyond the discussion that we are having today about coronavirus and its impact. You are talking about a revived economy. And I'm mentioning to you that if the V curve does actually come true, your economy will revive in 6 months to a year. And it is at that time that all these efforts will have to come into place. In fact, in many ways, I will say something which you may not quite agree with at the moment. I believe that in the future, the informal sector will become the formal sector.
Exactly.
In other words, what I'm trying to say is that the informal economy will become the new normal. This is happening because of the gig economy. This is happening because of technology. This is happening because of changes that are coming about at a global level, which is also happening in South Asia, whether it's Bangladesh or Nepal or India or Sri Lanka. We are seeing it happen. It will happen after the economy revives, not before. To make the economy revive, yes, you are right. Relief packages have to be announced for MSME sector, for everybody else. But if you look at the future, if you look at future of growth, future of work, if you look at the future of economies, it will become the norm for the informal to become the actual sector that will really be at advantages. India has a unique opportunity with this anti-China situation now developing around the world. A lot of the production features can shift to India. We can actually make ourselves just like Bangladesh has so successfully done with the textile sector. There are many other manufacturing areas that India can come into. India will be one of the countries where FDI will now want to go, because whether it is Indonesia, India, Malaysia, Singapore, these are places which are less impacted by the virus. These economies will revive much quicker because of our lockdown or whatever else you may say. And we have to take the advantage of this to make sure the economy revives. And when the economy revives, the small and medium sector, the MSME sector, the informal sector, all of it will begin to tick if in fact we are able to revive the overall economy.
Thank you. Dr. Enamul Haque, finally, two questions come to you now. Debt to GDP ratio, do you think that's a real worry? And this will put extra burden on the economies now? The second is MSME solutions.
In terms of Bangladesh, I think debt to GDP ratio can divide into two groups. One is external and one is internal. I think internal is going to be an issue because this has a burden on the banking system overall, and that is one. But at the moment, it is still not unbearable, and that's, to me, that's how I see it. Private loan is more difficult. I think that is the difficult one, because this is going to cripple the banking system in a way, because that's where the private loans are. In terms of the MSME, I think I would agree with the speaker that eventually they will become the new normal. Eventually they will help the economy to revive. And it will be both of a mixture of a technology and this real work in the smaller groups that will bring things together. And I think that is also going to be a competitive edge for countries like Bangladesh, India, because I think that's where the new future investment and strategies should guide us, because that will not only help the economy, but also at the same time keep the jobs at the base. Because I think for us, countries with populous countries, we need the basic jobs. And I think MSMEs are particularly a strategy that we can look into.
Excellent. Prashant Tandonji, I think you've been listening very patiently. Now your concluding remarks by you.
No, it was education for me to listen to eminent economists. I just want to add a couple of things. One is that I agree with Dr. Shariq Nisar that at the moment we cannot look at GDP and micro level things, verticals, commodities, etc. I remember one thing. When Reagan was moving out of office, and he was leaving a huge deficit. So a journalist asked him, "You're leaving with huge deficit." So Reagan said, "The deficit is big enough to take care of itself." So whatever problems we have, the future economies, future governments will take care of itself. At the moment, the challenges, the three challenges I see. One is that how to feed people, how to deal with hunger. The second important is employment. Forget about GDP. If you give employment, GDP will come. If your people are not hungry, GDP will come. People will buy food. So at the moment, the most important priority is to deal with hunger, to deal with employment generation, and to reinvent the word economic governance. that system has failed us. Because if you see last 15 days, how IMF also is, altering their own rules to deal with the crisis, because they don't have the kind of exercises and drills and workflows and regulations to deal with such crisis. So I think that we need to go back to Bretton Woods days, reinvent the new economic model. There will be new influencers of new economy.
Right.
For example, Didar Singh has mentioned that the technology companies, of course, one set of companies which are still working and which still has a consumer base earning revenues are digital companies. All these, mostly all of these are headquartered in US, like Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Microsoft, Apple. All these companies will be the big influencer for economic policies of tomorrow's to come. Then we'll have new influencers to replace the credit rating agencies. That nexus has to be broken, because what these credit agencies have done in last few
They will come strong.
decades
Yeah.
is 70% of the 80% of the GDP is concentrated on G20 countries. More than 50% of the GDP is concentrated at G8. That has to be diversified. And to diversify that, we need a new way of looking things.
Thank you.
The last point I just wanted to add is, see, we cannot presume the economy, the capital, the regulations, the trade flows from where the consumption is. At the moment, what we see is 75% of the consumption happens in Europe and US. Let's see when the world reopens, how the world societies are going to consume. Production will depend on what is being consumed, how is being consumed, and where is it being consumed. So the consumption pattern of future societies will depend the future economic activity, the future trade, regulations, tariff regimes, and production, all the supply chains, the flight of capital, etc. So what we have to see how the world wakes up after this lockdown and how the new consumption patterns come up. That will decide everything. But in the meantime, the most important thing is, again, I would repeat, to deal with hunger and to get.
So basically, what I find out from this discussion is, I think the inorganized sector is going to be the rescuer of the economies that the most of these emerging economies primarily are suffering from. That's a brilliant point that I got. The other sense that I got, the same panel, or maybe a bigger amount of people, when we were talking about constructing houses in moons and traveling in Mars on honeymoon, now we are talking about feeding people. So a lot of people. So coming back to the basics, I think most of the economies now will have to bring the basics or deliver the basics to their people, and then I think we will be able to talk about sustaining growth. Thank you so much, experts, Dr. Enamul Haque, Dr. Shariq Nisar, Professor Chowdhury, Prashant Tandon ji, Dr. Didar Singh, and Dr. Mansur. We will be back tomorrow again, viewers, with another set of panels on another issue. Thank you so much. Keep watching the Policy Times. हो गया जी, कैसा लगा सर? ठीक था? म्यूट
अच्छा था, काफी पर्सपेक्टिव आए लोगों के, एंड इट्स अ गुड आइडिया बिकॉज अभी तक सब लोग जो है लॉकडाउन